Alex, good to meet you. You okay?
Yeah, very good.
James, really nice to see you.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Project Peak Performance. James and I are delighted to be joined today by one of the UK's leading psychological life coaches. His loyal client bank includes high-profile celebrities, millionaires, billionaires, high-flying CEOs and business leaders. I personally have worked with this guy for 2.5 years, and I genuinely feel he has helped fast-track my mind, belief system and leadership skills by at least 5 years. And today, we're delighted to be doing this episode in person. So hello and welcome to the pod, Stephen James Copp. How are you today?
I'm really good, Alex. Thank you. And thank you for that really, I think, kind, shall we say, introduction. Really nice to meet you.
Every word.
Oh, well, that's really kind.
And I would say today, we obviously have people that will listen to episodes, but please take the time to go and watch this one. We're in magnificent surroundings. You've kindly brought us into your home to record today, and we've got a fantastic backdrop as well. So please go and watch this episode as well as listening, guys. So first things first question.
Yeah, fire away.
Tell us who Stephen is and what led you to become the person you are today.
Oh, so you don't ask small questions, do you, Alex? So who is Stephen? Well, I'm a life coach, as you say, and I work predominantly in a very specific niche area. I'm rubbish at most things in life. I'm not very good, and that's not me being modest, it's true. I'm not very good at most things, but I'm very, very honed in on a very specific area of performance. And what fascinates me is that area between good to excel. So when someone becomes elite, when they become elite, whether you're a singer, whether you're an executive, whether you're a housewife, whether you're a mum, dad, doesn't matter what you are, what I'm really fascinated in is that little bit in between, good and elite. And that's really difficult. It sounds easy, doesn't it? But it's a really difficult thing to achieve. And what I've found in over 20 years, really, of being in this industry, and sort of 30 years of naturally coaching, is that it's relatively easy to get to good, because good is just practice. Good is just practice, it's that simple. So we can all get to good, relatively easy, repetition. Have some passion, have some love, have some drive, repetition, you become good. And time, simple equation, repetition and time. But to get from good to excellent, to be extraordinary, that's a whole different kettle of fish. To be a Messi, to be a Ronaldo, to be a Bill Gates, to be, and I could go on and on and on, Muhammad Ali, you know, all these people, they've got something slightly different. And my question 25 years ago to myself was, how do they do that? How do I get that? And by the way, I'm not that. I'm not claiming to be that. But how can I get as close to that as possible? And how can I get other people to that? Because there must be a framework and a model. There has to be a model of how that works. So, to give you a little bit of background on myself, I grew up in a little fishing village in Devon. And this really leads into why I'm fascinated in outstanding performance. I grew up in a little fishing village in Devon, a little place called Biddyford, which most people wouldn't have heard of, by Westford Hole, Croyd, Woolacombe, a little sleepy place. And I went to school and I was diagnosed with dyslexia from the age of 6 or 7. And I was put into a class and called a retard. And that was the first story I remember being told. Now hold on to that word story. First story I heard was you're a retard. And then people would call me a retard. And then my parents on school open evening were told your son's retarded. And your son's backwards, he has learning difficulties. So let's just think, this is the 70s, giving my age away a bit here. But I was told, you got learning difficulties. And that was the story I started telling myself and continued to tell myself really all the way through school, leading up to me being disruptive. I was never aggressive, never nasty. Didn't leave school with 1 GCSE, nothing. And I left school and wandered around and kind of got a bit lost up until about 21, when I had first ignition. And I want you to hang on to that word, ignition. Ignition, 0, was the fact that all my life I've been told you're useless, you're no good, you're retarded, you can't learn, you can't spell, and I couldn't. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And there's a word for it, it's called Pygmalion effect. But I became really insecure, very low self-esteem, because I couldn't accomplish anything. I had no confidence. 21, I had an operation, an appendectomy, my appendix removed, and it went wrong. And I was conscious throughout the operation. from that, as a consequence, I got PTSD. So I was classified in, and then I was told by the doctors, so we've got school teachers telling you you're a retard, and excuse the word, but that's literally what was said verbatim. Then I've got the doctors telling me you'll never hold down a job because you'll always have anxiety. You've got chronic PTSD, a complex PTSD. Because complex PTSD is often a mixture of multiple traumas. So there I am, 21 years old, very unsure of myself, having panic attacks, anxious, scared, and lost. Very, very, very lost. Until one day I was sat in a bar, unemployed, what I have missed out here is I was married at 18 and I had 2 lovely children, one child at 18, one at 21. My marriage failed because ultimately I had all these problems. There was no violence, there was nothing nasty, there's nothing wrong. We just drifted apart and she left me. So I was really feeling sorry for myself. And I met a wonderful lady who doesn't live far from me now. She's a good friend. And she said, I think you need to speak to somebody. I think you need to speak to somebody about your health. She was a nurse and she was a very clever nurse. And it's somebody I'm deeply indebted to and I dearly love. She changed my life. And I met somebody who became my mentor, and he was a priest. I'm not religious in the slightest, but he just happened to be a priest. And he became my first mentor. And he said to me, I think you should have an IQ test. IQ test? I mean, I couldn't spell. And when I say couldn't spell, I couldn't spell, you know, literally. IQ test, what's that? He said, please do it for me. So he got me to do an IQ test in an adult learning centre. I'm 21 at this point. And I did this Helen Geraghty. And Helen, if you're watching, then lots of love to you, if you're watching, Helen. Helen oversaw this, and I had this IQ test, and she said, I want you to come back. And I was offered scampi and chips to do this IQ test, and a pint of beer. So as a young lad, I'm thinking, great, scampi and chips and a pint of beer. I'll do it. I'll do this silly test. And I didn't have nothing else going on in my life, so I did it. Then I had to go back a second time. So I was offered scampi and chips again. I was bribed all the time because for me it was a lot of nonsense. And also my family not being a family of education. You know, I'm first generation university educated. They were saying, what are you doing this rubbish for? Get out and earn a living, you know? Go and get some graft, boy. Get a trade. You know, that's get a trade, boy. Get a trade. My father would always say. And I'm thinking, I don't want to do the trade stuff. So she said, do this IQ test. Did the IQ test, went back for the second results. And she said, sit down. And I sat down. So I said, what's my score? She said, well, it's high. High? And what I did know was when I did the IQ test, I found it very easy. It seemed because it was problem solving, you know. No spelling, nothing like that, just problem solving. But I found it very easy. It just made sense to me. It didn't seem complicated. I thought they were playing with my head. She said, you got a high IQ. It was 138. 138 is considerably high. I think it's probably dropped a lot now with age. But 138 is considerably high, you know, with 100 being normal, 70 being learning difficulties. Remember, I'm tired of being retarded and with the severe learning difficulties. Not a good word, I must emphasize. Sorry to keep using that word, but that was the word used in my day, not to be used today in context. So she said, I think you should go to university. Really? University? Me? So I told my parents. They said, oh, it was so silly. Nobody from here goes to university. So I spoke to my mentor, who was incredible. And I cannot emphasize the importance of young men. And I've got a particular interest in the mentoring of young men because they're so disenfranchised. You know, the biggest death rate amongst young men out there under 45 is suicide. And that's because they lose their identity. They've got stories in their heads of who they are, and that doesn't fit the real world. So for me, my work is so fulfilling. So there I was, high IQ, great mentor. Suddenly my identity and the story I was telling myself started to change. And I started to say, well, hang on a minute. Why did I fail everything at school? If I'm so clever, why could I not spell? Why could I spell the word, you know, brick? Why could I not do the 6 multiplication? Algebra, why? And then it was explained to me that I learn in a different way, learn using different modalities. So I learn very much by doing, and I learn by colour. I was later taught what they call over-sensory stimulation or over-sensory input. So you learn with smell, colour. You identify these with the subjects you're You're learning and it sticks in your brain. Anyway, long story short, I ended up applying on my UCAS form to 6 universities. Prior to that, the college, I had to do my A-levels or an adult learning course. They wouldn't let me in because my school record was so bad. And this wonderful Helen Geraghty spoke and they let me in. And they said on one condition, one bit of trouble, you're out. Because all I would do was play football, play rugby, mess around, chase girls. That's all I was interested in. Because that's all I thought I could do. And my self-worth was on the floor. So here I am at this college, did the course, got great grades, sent off to 6 universities. And one of those universities was Durham. And I put that on there and I was advised, don't put Durham on there. It's a red brick university, an Ivy League university then. So it's up there with Oxford and Cambridge. Don't put that, you'll never get into Durham, you know. Let's stick to some universities which are the polytechnics turning into universities which might take you as an adult student and look upon you as charismatic or whatever. But then somebody else said to me, my mentor, no, put Durham on there. Let's see what fate has in store for you. So I put Durham, I applied for 6 universities, I went for 6 interviews, I got 6 offers. Durham, of course, stood out right at the top. And I joined Durham University. From this small fishing village, here I am at an Ivy League, one of the world premier universities, and in a lecture theatre, not believing something like Hogwarts. Here I am with all these very wealthy children, young adults, who were wonderful, but thought very differently to me. They had confidence, they had belief. Their parents had told them for most of their lives they're going to be successful. They're going to be chief executives. They're going to be business owners. They're going to be whatever they're going to be. I was always told, you're not going to be anything. So suddenly I started to realise there's something very different from me to them. They've got something I haven't. And it was belief. It was also the environment. You know, I have a great saying now. I say to my clients, I keep, as you can see behind us, there's a lake. I keep koi, and I've always loved fish. I once went to Japan and asked a koi breeder, how do you get the colours bright in a koi? How do you get it to be really vibrant? And how do you get the koi to be really happy and healthy and to be at its best, to perform at its best? He said, simple, look after the water. Don't try and look after the fish. Of course, that's a perfect metaphor for life. We have environments, our wives, our girlfriends, our partners, where we work, our jobs, what we eat, how we look after ourselves. And it was then I began to realise there was a sniff of, hey, there's something going on here. There's something going on here that I need to understand more of. At this point, I'm halfway through my degree. I get to the end of my degree and I pass, and I pass with a good grade. Who would have known? How did I do this? Wonderful experience. The most wonderful people I've ever known. Met lifelong friends. In fact, next year I'm best man at a friend I met there at his wedding, proud to be his best man. Changed my life. But most importantly, it started that critical thinking of questioning what I was telling myself about myself. Was that story true? And more importantly, was the story I was telling myself about myself serving me well? Was it serving me well? Was it getting me to where I want to go? I joined IBM, or part of the IBM group. It was a company within IBM in North Harbour in Portsmouth, and 5,000 employees in their headquarters. And I mean, it's huge corporate. And I progressed from there, went on into Scottish and Southern Energy as a head of corporate and public sector, and ended up managing huge teams. And I started to notice with my teams in sales that everybody had the same IQ, everybody came from similar backgrounds, but some people were performing 150% on target, 200%, and some were doing 50% on target. And no matter how many hard skills we focused on, no matter how much training we gave these people, no matter what we exposed them to, what incentives, you know, IBM, there was a DB7 you could have for being man of the month, you know, girl of the month. They wouldn't perform. Some just wouldn't perform, and they had all the tools and all the opportunity. And that really got me fascinated then in psychology. Really fascinated in psychology. And really fascinated, more importantly, in why are people not making it? And I wasn't really cutting the grade. I was getting promoted. I was getting promoted and I was doing well, but really not getting promoted on credit. So I wasn't enjoying the job, but I was getting promoted and going up fast. And it was at that point I really decided that instead of doing an MBA, I wanted to learn more and do a master's maybe in psychology and understand psychology more. So I moved into the psychological field, kind of a sidestep. And I started to coach within teams what I believed was right based on what my mentor had taught me, what I had learned. And miraculously, everybody started performing. Miraculously, my target, that everybody's hitting their target. And I got other directors coming to me saying, what are you doing to these guys? Are you paying them more money? Are you bigger commissions? No, what I'm doing is understanding what really motivates them.
What was it that you were coaching? Is there anything sort of practically you can tell us that could be useful?
And that's a really good question. And it took me a long time to understand that, both academically, but also personally for myself. What I found was emotional stability. So emotional stability. So we've got a sympathetic nervous system, and that controls all of our emotions. And this little thing that, if ever you read the book, a very famous book called The Chimp Paradox, it's called paleomammalian cortex. It's the back of the head, slightly forward a bit. And it's our emotions. What is really important, what successful people do really well, is they manage their emotions brilliantly. And what happens when we manage our emotions? We build meaningful relationships because we're calm and we're authentic and we're true. We can think objectively. So we can be very objective when we're speaking to people. We tend to be happy with ourselves. So we're kinder to ourselves. We tend to be, because we're regulated, we've got no trauma. There's nothing going up and down. So we go to the gym. We keep our bodies in shape. We feed well. We drink. We hydrate. We have self-respect. All of the good things that you could say goes towards performing well. But that happens by default, just by regulating that sympathetic nervous system. And we now know that if you imagine a computer has applications on it, open, and I'll phone the computer. A computer has applications open on it. When you have too many applications running in the background, that computer starts to degrade, doesn't it? Your phone doesn't work very well when you've got too many apps open. Your desktop doesn't work very well when there's too many apps open. And that's because there's too many apps in the background. It's using too much of the CPU or the RAM, the random access memory. So the brain works in the same way. And that's not a coincidence because the computer is an externalization of the brain. Neural networks, synapses, pathways, computers work in a very similar way. The brain does the same thing. When we have too many windows open, it starts to degrade. We start to lose performance. So with a computer, when there's too many applications open in the background, it freezes. Programs don't work. You try an Excel spreadsheet and it's blotching. I'm sure you've both had it at times. Word doesn't work. You try and send an email and it's spinning and spinning. It starts to degrade. It can reboot. It completely shut down. Well, guess what? The brain goes into one of four states when it's got too many applications open in the background. And I'll come on to what those applications are in a minute. But the brain goes into one of four states when it's got too many applications open. Goes into fight or flight. We're all familiar with that. Anxiety, flight. Fight can be anger, aggression. Or it goes into freeze and flop. Freeze and flop means I just can't be bothered. That's where the problems we've got. I can't be bothered. Procrastination. I'll do it tomorrow. I just can't be bothered. And that's because there are too many applications. Now, what are the applications in the human brain? We know what they are on a computer. And to solve it on a computer, we just go shut down all the applications. Computer starts whizzing along because you've got all the CPUs, got all the energy. What is it in the human brain that causes these applications then in the background to open up? And it's trauma. And when I say trauma, I really need to define to you what trauma is. I'll use some language which is sort of old school now and really not used in my world. But if we look at trauma, it's two divisions. One's called capital T trauma, and that would be classic abuse, accidents, near-death experiences, things where you thought you were going to die, big traumas. PTSD, complex PTSD. Then one that gets away, and which most people get caught with, is small t traumas. And they're just everyday events. That can just be a bad hair day, and I get them all the time. My hair's thinning desperately. But it can be just an argument with your partner. It can be just a simple day where, I don't know, you get a big electric bill where you didn't hit the target you wanted to hit. That is trauma, and that's logged. It's logged in the brain, in the emotional brain, and that's not processed, and it builds up. And over a period of time, often by the time we get to our 30s, I get clients usually coming to me late 20s, 30s and 40s, where suddenly say, I just don't feel myself. I don't know what's wrong. I just don't feel right. I don't feel motivated. And they might turn to cocaine, or they might turn to alcohol, or they might turn to some form of anesthetic or stimulant to get them through the day because the machine's not working, but they don't know what it is because it's all in the subconscious. So what I do is say, okay, I'm very much taken from Jordan Peterson, who is brilliant, by the way. Jordan, if you're watching, amazing, and his lectures are phenomenal. And I think one of the modern day classics and greats. What he does is an amazing program, and I use it to a certain extent, combined with other things, is a thing called past auditing, but most importantly, future authoring program. So what you can do is you can audit the brain. So I'll get my clients to let's do a little bit of psychoanalysis, understand your past. Let's put your brain out on a table like a jigsaw puzzle. Puddle, that's because of the rain. A Freudian slip there, one would say. Let's get it out on the table like a jigsaw puzzle. Let's keep what's good about you, what makes you you, your Steveness, your Jamesness, your Alexness. Let's keep the good stuff, but let's discard the bad stuff, what's not serving us well. Because what I've discovered is it's not the extra bits that make you good, it's the extra bits what hold you back that we need to get rid of. That's what the people who excel do. They identify, because they're emotionally regulated, what's holding them back, and they remove the barriers to performance.
It's interesting, you said quite early on. So firstly, I don't think I've ever sat in a recording of a pod for this long in complete silence because I'm so engrossed in what's being said that I'm struggling to find questions. But you said quite early on that you have, I'm not quoting what you said here, so it's just my version of it, is you have limited skills, but what you do have is an exceptional skill set that you've learned over time, is your almost unique ability. And I found that fascinating to listen to as you've been speaking, because I've then been connecting those dots to, you know, high performance individuals. Alex and I have a shared, I guess, interest in the types of people like Ronaldo, Messi, Michael Jordan, you know, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, all of these top. You've mentioned a few of those names, and they have these unique abilities. Now, one of the questions I have, and it ties in roughly to what you've shared here, is we believe there are 8 dimensions to almost a balanced life, to peak performance. And from some of our research, Alex, I think you'd agree, some of these high performers, there is sacrifice in their lives when they're at an elite level. What's your take on that? Do you believe that someone can perform at an ultra elite level? Let's use Michael Jordan as the example. Can you perform at his level and still have that balance in your life, or do you feel that there has to be sacrifice? Yeah,
and I think that's a really good question, and one I've pondered myself. I think ultimately I've yet to meet or worked with anybody. I've worked with hundreds of as you say, billionaires, performers, singers, actors, actresses, executives, and you know, just normal individuals. And pretty much I've yet to meet anybody who hasn't reached that very high echelon of performance without some form of sacrifice or some form of trauma and adversity. Now, if we look back to my life, and I don't really want to make this about me, I'm trying to want to give something to the viewers, but if I look at my life...
Sorry to interrupt you, Stephen, but you've given loads of value to the viewers based on the story you've shared so far. And I just for context, you know, there was so much of what you shared in your early years story that I was sitting there thinking, this is so relatable. The whole GCSEs, being a bit of a distraction at school, not a troublemaker, but someone who liked to have fun, so very relatable, I think, to a lot of people in the audience. So your story so far, I think, is fascinating, and so therefore will be very valuable.
And if we look at the educational system, and God bless it, you know, and I'm not in any way being detrimental towards it, but it's really about memorizing. They don't teach critical thinking. They don't teach you to think for yourself. They don't realize that we all think slightly differently. Doesn't mean that you're stupid or you're silly. And children can grow up with the wrong identity and end up in prison because they believe they haven't got the intellect. I've worked with some people who've been, you know, been in some serious trouble in their youth because they believed that they weren't worthy, but they were actually super smart. Some criminals are super smart, but they didn't see a way in life to make money. So they turned to crime because everybody tells them they're stupid, silly. So the educational system, certainly in the 70s, was all about really memorizing, regurgitating facts.
I mean, to be fair, James and I have got children. I've got school-age children, soon to be school-age children, and I think they're still sort of questions
Right.
about the education system today, but that's maybe another conversation.
And probably is, we could speak a lot on that. But for me, it's really important for children to have a struggle, not to be helped too much. And I think there's a silent pandemic going on out there. I don't think I know, based on the people that approach me. There's a silent pandemic going on there beyond COVID, beyond anything. And it's emotional dysregulation. So many people, and I think as high as 80, 85% are dysregulated. And they're told that from their GP, and bless the GPs, we've got wonderful NHS, great GPs out there who I admire. A lot of my friends are GPs, colleagues, but they've got 15 minutes. You get 4 sessions of CBT on the NHS, it's underfunded. And they're told you've got anxiety. Now, just hold on to that, or you've got depression, because of your stories you're telling yourself based on this youth. But just hold on to that thought for a second. Have they got clinical depression and anxiety, or is it situational? It's the water they're in.
The environmental.
There you go. And nobody's got the time to research that and say, you don't need the medication. You're not ill. And for the rest of their lives, they believe they suffer from depression or anxiety. They don't. You're just in a bad situation, or you've had a divorce. Of course you're going to feel down, or you've lost somebody, or you lost a friend, or you've witnessed something bad. That doesn't need medicating, that needs talking and processing and understanding. So that brings me back to my life. I hit then 35 and I'm flying at this point, but I'm at good. I'm earning good money. I lived in a lovely house, had a wonderful girlfriend. I had a few cars, it sounds ostentatious, but we did. And life was good. And like I said to you, I was married at 18, I had 2 children, divorced. Through my dysfunction. And at 35, my son was killed. One evening there was a knock at the door, and it was about 6 o'clock in the evening. I was on my own. My partner was away on a course. I'd been for a run that morning in the sun, early in the morning, along Portsmouth seafront, because I was working in Portsmouth. And there was a knock at the door and 2 policemen stood there. And I thought, what do they want? I've not committed a crime. I mean, I've not ever committed a crime in my life. Is it a parking ticket? Speeding ticket I've not paid or something, And they said, can we come in? I said, okay, sure. Can you sit down? And I sat down and said, and unfortunately this morning at 7:20 or 7:15, I can't remember the exact time, your son, who was then 18, was fatally killed in a car accident. And my world changed in a second. And that night I slept downstairs. My girlfriend, who was great, cuddled into me, and my son. And I tell everybody this story, and it's important, and it might not appeal to everybody, but it's the truth. I'm a man of science, a psychologist, I guess, to a certain extent, but I'm a man of science. I'm not woo-woo. I don't believe in space dust or unicorns. I get people to perform. That's what I do. I assist them to perform. However, that night I slept, and my son used to wear an aftershave called Jupe. Don't know if you remember it.
I did.
But when we were all young, it's very strong smelling, very specific smelling aftershave. None in my house, because I was a bit older. And I woke up in the night and the room was full of the smell of Jupe. I could smell it everywhere. Now, was that psychological? Was that my son communicating? Conversation for another time. But that was the beginning of a whole new chapter. I sold my house. I separated from my partner. I sold all the cars. I resigned. I studied. And I rented a small barn on Haylen Island by Portsmouth. And I think it was £300 a month, if I recall. It's a long time ago. And every morning I ran on the beach, and every evening I fished, and I ran, and in between I read. I had a few pounds in the bank left. And I studied, and I must have read maybe 500 books, 300 books, who knows. But I spend everything on books, on psychology. And then one morning, I stopped running. I simply stopped. And I realized that I had that moment where you have that realization. And we now know with neuroplasticity, that realization moment is new synapses firing up, a new belief system, a new neural pathways being created. It's hardwiring. We're changing our brain. This is so exciting, and really excites me, because anybody can achieve this. Anybody can do it. And that's what I love. You don't have to be limited.
So here's a question I've got for you then, Stephen. I love the passion behind the neuroplasticity and the ability to rewire our thinking.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to do this, how do you get them into a state where they're capable.
Yeah.
There's
Really.
a lot of people out there, I think, would potentially relate to the idea of they want to behave differently. They want to live their lives differently. But they just don't know how to get into that state.
Really good question. So I do my calls, hourly calls, my sessions over Zoom or over Skype. And that works really well because it gives a nice safe barrier between you. So how I do is you've got to what's called co-regulate them. So the first 15 minutes of a session, I'm talking and using certain tools and techniques to relax somebody. And it might be slowing my voice down. Milton Erickson was a genius of this. So it's Ericksonian techniques. So I'll slow my voice down, calm them down, ask them about the football. Alex, we've worked together. Yeah. We often have a chat about football, the boxing, or the weekend.
Talking about the football right now doesn't slow anybody down. It probably heightens them ever so slightly.
True.
We'll look back on this and we've won the Euros and it'll be fine.
We'll have a sweepstake. So in the early days, I'm co-regulating you. So what I'm going to do, hopefully by the end, is that co-regulation, you learn and I teach you how to regulate yourself. So it starts off with me co-regulating you. So often at the end of a session, a client will say, I feel great, but what have you done? We didn't do anything. They expect surgery, but I feel great. And often Alex will say, I feel so much lighter. You know, Alex, you've had moments like that. What's he done? What sort of juju have you done? You know, well, of course, it's belief. It's me using certain tools and techniques to calm that sympathetic nervous system down, to bring your brainwave activity, slow it down, slow you down, and create a safe space. That sounds a bit woo-woo, but it's really important for the brain to perceive that it's safe. When it feels safe, then it's really, really receptive to information that I can give it. But nobody is immune to being happy. You know, anybody can achieve it.
I think in the modern world as well, people are after instant gratification, things to happen quickly.
Right.
So they don't really want to sort of have to wait for too long for something to kick in. So with something like neuroplasticity, obviously you have to be genuinely open to change.
Yeah.
But how long would you say it takes? How many sort of sessions or how much time individually thinking about something different does it take to actually get that into your belief system and for those neurons to rewire?
Yeah, good question. So I work in a slightly different way to, shall we say, counsellors, because I'm not a counsellor. Please don't confuse me with a counsellor. Albeit I work with people who are anxious, I work with people who are depressed, but I'm not a counsellor. I'm a performance really psychologist in inverted commas. And how long does it take? Well, we know of roughly about 3 months, 12 weeks, which is why I work in 12-week programs. For instance, you take when you buy a new house, or you're in a new relationship, or a new job. It's about 3 months to get used to it, to start feeling part of the team, to start being accepted, to start for your neuroplasticity, for your neurons, to start new neurons, new pathways, new belief systems, to start being created, and for you to start feeling safe and comfortable. So about 12 weeks and an hour a week. You can accelerate that, but I try to encourage my clients not to. Take an hour a week, and they message me throughout the week. I encourage them to WhatsApp me and keep in touch, and we keep co-regulating until eventually they start to self-regulate. And the realization in their eyes, and suddenly they realize, I'm no longer led by my emotions, I'm leading my emotions. That's a game changer. That's a game changer. I can choose how I want to feel. That's a massive, powerful thing. And if we look at the biggest celebrities, they control their own narratives. Messi, Muhammad Ali, one of the best. You know, Conor McGregor. Look how he talks a fight up. How he talks himself up. I cannot be beaten. But he does it with actions. I'm going to bed at the right time. I'm eating the right food. I'm doing the right training. How can I be beaten? I'm doing everything right. So he's got a map. He's got a roadmap to success. And he knows, you can't beat me. And when you're in that mindset, you cannot be beaten. Eddie Hearn, I was seeing the other day, Barry Hearn, his father, was saying, you can't beat me. You can knock me down. You cannot beat me. I am unbeatable. I am unbeatable. That's a mindset. He's no different to me, you, Alex, or you, James. No different to any of us, other than his belief system. And we'll come on to that later on, I'm sure, as we talk about how to achieve elite performance, or at least how to move towards it.
I think it's sort of personal responsibility, accountability, however you term it, is probably one of the most powerful things that
Agreed.
people can have. You know, you wake up in the morning, what side of the bed are you getting out? Are you getting out of the opportunity side? Or are you getting out at the, it's another day, I've got to do this, and sort of scaling that fear of how you're going to live your day that day?
Yeah.
One of the most powerful things you can have in your life.
Couldn't agree more. But thinking about accountability, where does that come from? It comes from having a regulated sympathetic nervous system. If you're dysregulated, you're not going to be accountable for anything. You're going to be quite the opposite. You'll do irrational things. You'll do silly things. You'll take silly drugs. You'll make bad decisions. You won't have objectivity. Emotional regulation is everything.
Yeah, I was just thinking then, I suppose people that emotionally are unregulated, or whatever the terminology would be, dysregulated, they'll probably make decisions with haste and everything's in a rush.
100%.
So it's very interesting hearing you talk about that, knowing people around me that probably operate in that way. I'm almost
100%.
processing my environment and the people that are around me that potentially operate in an emotionally dysregulated way.
100%.
And on occasion, I am definitely reflecting and thinking, okay, I am definitely relating to some of the comments you made. So for those that are listening,
Yeah.
are there any, look, I appreciate there are no silver bullets, there are no quick fixes,
Sure.
but there are, I imagine, some tools that you could share that don't give away your secret sauce, that don't stop people from paying
Sure.
for your support, but
Sure.
that they could deploy into day-to-day life.
Yeah.
You know, one top tip almost of, if you do this, this
Yeah.
will set you on the path.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So one thing I'm going to say is probably not going to be popular with my colleagues is beware self-help books. And there's a reason for it. And the reason being is that it's very hard to be objective when you're reading about yourself. You can only be subjective, subject to your life experience. So it can put you in a spin and make you worse to some extent, because you can read and think, yeah, but it frustrates me. I've read that. He says it'd be easy. Just let go. And I've tried and it doesn't work. You really do need that other person. So what I would say is journaling is really, really good. Getting it out of your head. Journal. And start to write down who you want to be. You know, find a role model. Find a role model.
You said it earlier, all for your future. So
Self-author.
in essence, that is
Perfect.
the epitome of
Perfect.
authoring your future, right? Is to journal.
100%. And Alex, I know you've got two lovely boys and a lovely girl. And I know your boys are crazy about football. And one of them's particularly, relatively talented. And I know that he's watching. You encourage him to watch the good players, the good role models, who are passing on the right belief system.
Yeah, it's phenomenal to see, actually. They're both obsessed, and obviously one is sort of slightly more advanced because of age as well.
Right.
But the other one will certainly sort of try and catch up. But yeah, I see the biggest inspiration that they get, where they want to go and play football and they train harder than ever before, is when they're watching role models on YouTube compilations,
Yeah.
the likes of Messi, Maradona, Pele, Ronaldo, R9. They'll watch that for 5-10 minutes, and then suddenly they're outside. They're commentating on their next move, and they're working 10-20% higher than they would do normally. So it's a complete mindset of, I want to be that person. I can imagine myself being that person in front of those fans, scoring that goal. Yeah, great point.
There's a spin-off question where you're sharing that about your lads, and there's a couple of videos on YouTube, and I find that if ever I go to do some form of exercise, go to the gym, whatever else, and I'm feeling a little bit flat, there's one particular video that I'll watch. It's 7 minutes, so I watch it whilst I'm on the warm-up on the bike or whatever else. And it's the Kobe Bryant story. And I go from feeling flat to, okay, now I'm ready to run through walls. What is the psychology and the science behind that? Now, I appreciate it's fantastic video and editing, and I appreciate I'm probably connecting to the Kobe Bryant story, but is there something deeper than that?
Oh, of course. The possibility. You're opening mind to the possibility of change, the possibility of your life being something different. And also that's co-regulating you. That's calming you down. It's meditative. You're focusing on that single point. It's co-regulating you. Now, if you're out in the kitchen drinking coffee and just sat there thinking and procrastinating, that's going to take you in a different direction. But you're watching somebody inspirational. You're watching somebody inspirational. They're co-regulating you kind of in an indirect way, but most importantly, motivating you. And we come back to accountability. accountability is super important. Very hard though when you're not regulated. Once again, very, very hard when you're not regulated. Procrastination is one of the very first. In fact, it's the title of one of my books down here, Procrastinate to Perform. Procrastination is just putting off things because you don't want to do them, you perceive them as hard, and you make up stories to avoid doing something. But how about we start making up stories to do something? And we self-author. Stop self-authoring, but first of all, self-regulate. So you said earlier, James, what are some tips? One of the top tips I ever heard, I can't claim it as mine, but it's brilliant, is make your bed in the morning. Make your bed perfect.
The head of the Navy.
Yeah. Make your bed, because you're starting with a win. You're starting with, I'm feeling your self-esteem is already up. Your regulation, because you've done something, the brain likes order. We're order and chaos all the time. When you're not regulated, your brain's in a chaotic state. When it's in a chaotic state, you make bad decisions. You make bad decisions, it fuels mistakes. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You get one thing right, start off in the day, one thing right, or exercise that you get right, exercise program, or your meal, your first meal of the day. I like it with the dishes. I like to clean my plate, clean the plate, put it away, make it nice and tidy. Sounds a little bit, OCD, but you've started the day getting something right. As simple as cleaning the dish, your bowl.
Again, it's interesting you say that. I was listening to something, I think it was yesterday, it might have been an audiobook, and it was talking about the military and how they put them through such rigorous, especially at elite level, the Royal Marines, etc. There's such what would be deemed trivial tasks, where I read in one story about the Royal Marines where they basically go to the top floor of the building at is it Lympstone? Yeah. And they throw all of their kit, basically, so their boots get scuffed. You put me onto the book. But the point is that they've then got to get themselves straight on quite a trivial task. And if they're going to do that and they're going to do that properly and do it well, then when they're in the field of battle, when people's lives are at risk, they're going to do the operational tasks properly. Absolutely, because they do the basics right.
Yeah, love it. Another interesting thing, and the commanding officer of Sandhurst said this, I believe. It was a quote that I observed some years ago, but really is really, really, really important. He said, what's the most important thing you teach the officers before they pass out? So imagine you're in battle, right? You're in a platoon, you've got some young lads behind you. You say you're 25 and you're an officer, first lieutenant, for instance, or a first class officer, and then you've got some privates behind you, say 12, 16. They're looking at your behaviour, right? We're primates, so we're group animals, pack animals. We follow the alpha, and the alpha's the officer. Okay, so we're following his behaviour. And one of the main things that they teach there is, when you're in battle, when there's a lot of flak, when there's you're under fire, take a knee, stop. And what he meant was stop and regulate. Be calm. If you're calm, guess what? The 16 guys and girls behind you are going to be feeling calm as well. If you lose your head, they lose theirs. Watch The Expendables, that's a great example. I love those movies, they're great fun. Sylvester Stallone, what a great actor. This guy's come up with 3 franchise, all genius. But he's the leader of the pack. He's always very calm. Stays calm, never gets emotionally led. Look at any top athlete, any boxer, any fighter, any senior executive. Dare I say, a good politician shouldn't. We won't go there, but a good politician shouldn't become emotionally led. That's not to say don't be happy. Of course, be happy. But there are certain times when we need to use a different part of our brain. But take a knee was the best advice you can give an officer. In times of trouble, stop, go down on a knee, just breathe. And that's another good thing. A little tip to everybody out there, just take a breath and breathe in for 5 seconds, hold for 6, breathe out for 7. Just do that 2 or 3 times. Just stop and give yourself some time. Just stop. Simple little breathing exercise. Now it's minute, but it's a marginal gain. Now if along that way we've got 100 of those built into you subconsciously, hey, we're starting to get a 5 or 10% improvement on your performance. And that's the problem. Most people go looking for